Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis, the second line from the top. Omer Papa. We learned previously that the Mashke Beis Midbechaya was Dochen, the Edus of Yosef ben Yezer. So he said that the mashke in either the butchering place or the mashke that went on the Mizbeach was Torah. And the assumption that we were working on till now is that if the tumah of the mashkim is a deraisa, it wouldn't have been Torah. If the tumah was a tumah derabanan, then in the Beis Hamikdash, the Chachamim were not geyser. Now, Rav Papa now offers a different pshat, a different interpretation, which the Gemara will reject. But Rav Papa initially offered the following. He says, Rav Papa, he says, no, even if you hold that tumas mashkim is deraisa, that mashkim liquids that could become either tumah or can convey tumah is midaraisa, but mashke beis mitbechaya helps the gemirlo. It's halacha l'moishe misinai that nevertheless that in the Beis Hamikdash the mashkim of the beis mitbechaya with tahar. It's halacha l'moishe misinai, so they're not connected one to the other. Omerle Rav Huna Bereder of Nosson Rav Papa. He asked on Rav Papa, how can you say that? V'alaha da'ama Rav Elazar said, "Ein tumah l'mashim kolik." He said that the tumah don't apply to liquids at all. Teda, and I'll prove that to you. Sharei Heid Yosef ben Yezer ish Sreida al mashke beis mitbechaya dochan, that he was made that the mashke in the Beis Hamikdash is tahor. So therefore, he said, Rabbi Elazar said, well, how could it be the mashke in the Beis Hamikdash be tar? If it's a tumah deraisa, it couldn't be tar in the Beis Hamikdash. Must be that the tumah of the mashkim is a derabanan, and in the Beis Hamikdash they weren't geyser. So he's proving that therefore it must be derabanan. So you see that they're connected. Now, if you say, like Rav Papa suggests, that it's a halacha l'moishe misinai, that it's tahor, so it's not connected to whether the mashke is tamei b'deraisa or not. How can you learn out from there? And how can you learn out from the mashke mitbechaya on the status of the tumah deraisa of mashke? Elamai, you see, there's no halacha l'moishe misinai, and the fact that the mashke beis mitbechaya is tahor, that shows you that the whole tumah for mashke is derabanan, and they weren't geyser in the Beis Hamikdash. Amalei Ravina Ravashi, another kash, he says, Rabbi Shimon dama tumas mashke deraisa. That Rabbi Shimon his hoshita is that tumas mashke is deraisa. Now, based on Rav Papa's reasoning is, well, if he held that it's deraisa, nevertheless, it should be torn in the Beis Hamikdash because it's halacha l'moishe misinai. However, what we see over here is that Rabbi Shimon says tumas mashkim is deraisa. The Sanyo, how do we know that? Because the Brisa says Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon, Aimrim, they say l'kelim tahir. If there is a suffix, if mashke touched kelim, then we say it's tor. Lo eichlem tamei. If it touched oichlim, it's tamei, meaning that mashke could be matama oichlim deraisa, and therefore if it's a suffix, it's tamei. If it's kelim, then it's tahor because it's not matama kelim deraisa. But if it is matama oichlim deraisa, and therefore suffix is tamei. Lo oichlim, it's tamei. It's tamei. So Rav Shimon's shita is that mashkim has a tumah deraisa. Avahacha kohama Rabbi Shimon. Nevertheless, here as far as the Beis Mitbechaya, he says bekelim tameim bekarka tahir. He says if the liquid of the beverages were in the place when it became tamei in kelim, then they're tamei. Then it's considered tamei. And if it's in the karka, and the karka, it's tahir. So if they were in kelim, that they're tamei. Now, if you hold that, like Rav Papa, that even if you hold that tumas mashke is a deraisa, but it's halacha l'moishe misinai that in the Beis Hamikdash is tahor, why would Rav Shimon say that bekelim it's tamei? Bekarka tahirim, that's a special halacha of karka, as we'll explain more fully shortly, and as we saw previously. But bekalim, it says, if the liquid of the beverages are in a keli, even if it's in the base of mikdash, it's tummy. Well, just because Rabbi Shimon holds that mashkim have a tumah d'oraisa, according to Rav Papa, the halacha l'maishem yisina nevertheless says that it's tor. And you see over here that not that way. Rabbi Shimon holds that kalim has a tumah d'oraisa, and it's tumah in the base of mikdash. So you see, there's no halacha l'maishem yisina. It's only in the karka that's it's tahirim, because in the karka, if it's in the ground, it's a mikveh, and there's no tumah d'oraisa over there. But in the kalim, there's a tumah d'oraisa, and it's tumah even in the base of mikdash. So you see that there's no halach l'meishim yisin. And if you would say there's a halach l'meishim yisin, mali b'kalim, mali b'karka, there should be no difference whether it's d'oraisa or d'rabbanan. The halach l'meishim yisin is saying that it's tar. Elamai kasha, you see that it's not like Rav Papa, that it's not so. And therefore, when we say that the mashke b'midnachai is dochen, it's tar, it's only on the tumah d'rabbanan. But if it would be tumah d'oraisa, it would not be tar. Now that we brought down this din of the kalim and the karka, the Gemara explains it more fully. So Rav Shimon said that the water, the liquids, if it's in the kalim, there's a tumah d'oraisa, it's tumah in the base of mikdash. If it's in the karka, if it's in the ground, it's tar. He says, Lo yishon olamayim, aval dam loy. It only applies to water, but not blood, not mime. Umayim nami lo yarman eladam v'revius. And even the water that we say, that's only if it's a revius of water. Because it can be used as it has the quantity of water that midaraisa, you can be tayvel machtim v'tzinayos. You can use it for forks, or for pins and needles, and for spinning forks. They can be used for that purpose. They can be immersed, rather, totally in that quantity of water, and the water is sufficient to immerse them, and it's therefore a mikveh d'oraisa. Avaloy have a revius tameim, but if it's not a revius where midaraisa it's not a mikveh, then they're tamei. So meaning, the pshat is, as we explained before, what is the chilik between kalim and between karka? Mashkim has a tumah d'oraisa. If it's in a keli, it's tumah d'oraisa, and therefore even the base of mikdash is tumah. Now, water in the karka, what we mean to say is that water in the karka, where it has a din of a mikveh, it has a din of a mikveh that it's torah. So something that comes into tumah, that comes into contact with a mikveh, is not going to be matamet. But that's only if it's a kosher mikveh. If it's in the ground, then it's a kosher mikveh. So therefore, it applies to water, but it doesn't apply to dam. It doesn't apply to blood. That's number one. Number two is that it has to be a shiur of a mikveh. It has to be a shiur of a mikveh, and therefore, as far as a person is concerned, you need arboim soap. Now, for small keli, machtan tzinairis, you don't need arboim soap midaraisa. It would be sufficient to have even a smaller, a revius. A revius would be enough because you can immerse it there. So that would also be kosher for a mikvah. However, the Rabbanon were geyser that no, even for that, even for the small kelim, you need arboim soap. The geyser arboim soap. However, since that's a din d'Rabbanan in the Beis HaMikdash, they weren't geyser. So that's what it means. It means is that the water, even if it's only a revius, if it's in the karka, it's kosher for machta and it's a din of a mikvah. It's in the Beis HaMikdash. They weren't geyser. The tumah is not makabel tumah, but other liquids can't be a mikvah, and therefore. It makes no chilek between the karka and the kelim. Even in the karka, they will be tomei because it has a tumah d'oraisa. It has a tumah d'oraisa according to Rabbi Shimon, and therefore it will be tomei even in the Beis HaMikdash. So based on this, there's a discussion in Tosfos and the Rishonim about maim shuvim. It would seem to imply from here that maim shuvim, drawn water, would be kosher for a mikveh d'oraisa. It's only mid'Rabbanan that it's geyser, because presumably the waters that were there in the Beis Mikdash were maim shuvim, and if they're in the karka, then we would say that it would be tor mid'oraisa. It would have a din of a mikveh. So they want to bring a raya from here that midaraisa mayim she'uvim, drawn water is kosher from mikveh. It's only midrabanan that it's also. Amar ma Rabbi Yehuda Omer l'kol tomei. Rabbi Yehuda holds that mashkim have a tumah deraisa, and it can be metame if it comes into contact with either foods or even kalim, l'kol. Anything that it comes into contact with, it'll be metame. So the Meimer Desava, Rabbi Yehuda, Tumas Mashkim, Latama, Tumas Kelim deraisa, you mean to say that he holds that Tumas Mashkim, that liquids are Mashkim, Tumas Kelim, they can be Metame Kelim midaraisa, that if they come into contact with Kelim, they're Metame even midaraisa. That's not, we learned in the Mishnah, Kol Kelim Sheyesh L'Macharayim V'Toich, any Kelim that have an interior and an exterior. Like if you have a bowl or something or a cup, something that has an interior hollow and it has an exterior. Kigan karmik sasav sakimat sufim, like pillows, cushions, sacks, and leather bags. So you have a bag, you have a sack, it has an interior, it has an exterior. Nitma teicha, nitma gaba. If the interior became tame, meaning the tumah came into contact with the interior, then nitma gaba. The exterior is also tame. Nitma gaba, like nitma teicha. But if the exterior came into contact with the tumah, the exterior is tumah, but not the teicha. Now, minatayra, a tumah comes into contact with a kli, it's either metamet or it's not metamet. Minatayra, we're not machalik, we don't differentiate between the outside and the inside of the kli. The kli is tumah, it's tumah in totality. The entire kli is tumah. So this din is a din d'Rabbanan. This is a din d'Rabbanan that the Rabbanan were geyser certain tumas, and they wanted to differentiate between a tumah d'oraisa and a tumah d'Rabbanan. So they wanted to make it clear that in the case where the tumah is a tumah d'Rabbanan, that people should know it's a tumah d'Rabbanan. So therefore, if it came into contact with truma and kachim, it should not be burnt. If it's a truma d'oraisa, it came into contact with truma and kachim, it has to be burnt. Midrabanan, it should not be burned, so they wanted to make it clear that this is a tumah d'Rabbanan, so people should not burn trum and kachim. So they said that they have these type of kalim that have an interior and exterior. So they said that if it's nitma teicha, if the interior, if it came into contact with the interior, then the exterior is also tumah. But nitma gaboy, if the exterior came with the nitma teicha, the teicha is not tummy. And Amar Yehuda b'medvarim nitmu machmas mashkim. What are we talking about over here? We're talking about tumas mashkim. Meaning, so apparently he holds that tumas mashkim is a d'Rabbanan. It's a gzera d'Rabbanan. Midaraisa, there's no tumah by mashkim. The Rabbanan were geyser that there should be a tumah mashkim. There were geyser that the mashkin even is matama kelim. Meaning midaraisa that mashkim are not matama kelim midaraisa. Midaraisa they're not matama kelim. The Rabbanan were geyser that they are matama kelim. Why were the geyser the matama kelim? Because there are certain types of mashkin which are matama kelim midaraisa. There are certain types of mashkin, like a mashka of the zav, the roik, or of the roik or the meiraglaim, of a zava, that is metame midaraisa kelim. That's an avatum. It's metame midaraisa. So they were geyser on other types of liquids that are tame, that midarabanan, that they should also be geyser, but they made this heker, so you should know that it's midarabanan, so it's not burned from and kachim. So when is this said, this differentiation that we said, that's only v'snitmu b'machmas mashkin. Aval nitma machmas sheretz, but if the kalim came into contact with the sheretz, then nitma teicha, nitma gaba, nitma teicha, that's a tumah d'oraisa. So the sheretz is mitam of the kalim midoraisa. So there's no difference between the interior and the exterior. Now, these salkadaitach tumas mashkim mitam kalim d'oraisa. Well, if you hold, like we just said, the Rabbi Yehuda holds that mashkim that become tumah, are not only Tomei D'Oraisa, and can not only be Matama Eichel D'Oraisa, but can even be Matama Kelim D'Oraisa. Then it's a Tuma D'Oraisa, Mali Nitma Machmas Mashkim, Mali Nitma Machmas Sheretz. What's the difference in how the water and how the Kelim became Tomei, rather? What's the difference if the Kelim became Tomei through a Mashkin or became Tomei Machmas Sheretz? What's the difference? So doesn't that show you that the Tumas Mashkim to be Metame Kelim is not a D'Oraisa? Gemara says, Amar Yehuda Mashmuel Chazer Boy Rabbi Yehuda. We must say that he retracted from his previous opinion that said that if it's a suffix, it is Metame the Kelim. He retracted and he held no, that the Mashkim which are Tomei are not Metame Kelim Mid'Oraisa. Ravina suggests, perhaps, Ravina Omar Loy Hadar. Maybe he was not Chayzer. He says, Ha b'mashkim aboy machmas yadayim, ha b'mashkim aboy machmas sheretz. We can differentiate between the water itself, between the liquid itself. If it's something that's mashbachmas yadayim, now the Rabbanan were geyser tuma on yadayim, stam yadayim. They were geyser that there should have a status of a sheni l'tuma. And therefore, if hands, stam yadayim, which there was no tefillah on them, stam yadayim, that they didn't have a tefillah or a tefillah, they touched the water. Now the principle is the midrabanan, that whatever sheni that comes into contact with water becomes a rishon. So therefore, if the water or the beverage came into contact with the yadayim, it would be a rishon midrabanan. Then we would say then it would not be matama the kelim D'Oraisa. But here we're talking with the mashkim that became tomei through a sheretz. It became a tomei through a sheretz, which is tomei D'Oraisa, and over there it would be matama. It would be matama the kelim D'Oraisa. So therefore, he wants to be machalik between the type of tuma that the liquid had. If it became tomei machmas yadayim, which is a tuma d'Rabbanan, it would not be metame the kelim D'Oraisa. But if it became tomei through a sheretz, which it has tuma d'Oraisa, it would be metame the kelim D'Oraisa, according to Rabbi Yehuda. And over there, we would not make this chilik between the interior and the exterior. This chilik that we made between the interior and the exterior is only if it's a tuma machmas yadayim, which is a tuma d'Rabbanan. Yet over here, it seems that he's suggesting that if it became tomei through the sheretz, which is a tuma d'Oraisa, then it would be matama the kelim D'Oraisa. Pnei Yeshua points out that even though if it became tomei through a sheretz, it's only a rishon l'tuma, and what the rule we have is that a rishon l'tuma is not matama kelim D'Oraisa. But he held that Rabbi Yehuda would not agree with that principle, and he would say that if it became tomei through a sheretz, which it's a rishon d'Oraisa, as opposed to yadayim, which is a rishon d'Rabbanan, then it would be matama. How can you say that? Well, he's machalik Rabbi Yehuda between the interior and the exterior. He says, he's machalik where the kelim became tomei through a liquid, through the mashke, or through a sheretz. Why is he being machalik dafka between a liquid and sheretz? You can be machalik even in a liquid itself, according to this. When is that so? That's only b'mashkim boy machmas yadayim. But aval b'mashkim, even mashkim itself, b'mashkim boy machmas sheretz, if the mashkim became tomei through a sheretz, nitma teicha, nitma gaba, nitma teicha. If it became liquid through a sheretz, which is a rishon d'Oraisa, it would be matama both the interior and the exterior. Why does he put mashkim on one side and sheretz on the other side? Even in mashkim itself, you can subdivide it between machmas yadayim, machmas sheretz. We have to say that no, this is not so, and it's chazer by Rabbi Yehuda, and he retracted it, and he therefore held that mashkim are not metame kelim D'Oraisa; they're only metame D'Rabbanan.